Here is a brief overview of the three individual ceramic styles associated with the region known as ancient West Mexico, but which is incorporated today by the modern states of Nayarit, Jalisco, and Colima. This is also known as the Shaft Tomb Arc, and as you can see on the map here to the side, that the known sites where these villages with this type of cemetery arrangement are located go in an arch, not right along the sandy coastline. And we worked on the Shaft Tomb Arc in class together. We're going to start with the style known as Colima, and most of those are actually in the modern day state of Colima. Then we'll move forward to Nayarit, and finally several visual examples of the style known as Jalisco. Now, all of these are mortuary furnishings to the best that we currently know. And that means that the ceramics have been recovered from shaft tombs. And so they were placed in there as part of the funeral ceremonies. Overwhelmingly, the ceramics show animals, plants, and people. But one of the styles, Nayarit, also shows activities and ceremonies in process. Colima style figures, like all three of the versions, are hand modeled, and that means they were made by hand, not in molds. So each one is somewhat slightly different. However, the style is very easy to recognize. They are orange to a deeper red in color and have minimal lines or incisions on the surface of the ceramics. They often, as figures, also served as bottles or jars, meaning there's a spout or spouts on them, and they may have had some other purposes, which we'll take a look at when we see a couple of examples as well. They are nicely burnished, and that means that the specialist making these ceramics actually took a smooth stone and polished the surface of the ceramic before it prior to firing. So they're very, very smooth on the surface. Not a lot of other surface decoration. And they're not painted on the surface or any of the examples that are currently known. This style is the most replicated, faked, and made as collectibles of all three of the styles, and have rarely ever been discovered actually within the tomb. So all of the figures that we're going to see in this presentation are overwhelmingly the product of looting. Okay, most famous of these are the Colima dogs, and as we can see here on the left, make these and attempt to sell them as originals, and therefore they are not accurate in many ways. This is from being in underground for a prolonged period of time. As we've noticed in your reading and in class, most of these figures we're looking at in this presentation were created between about 250 years before the current era to several centuries after the current era. So they're approximately 2,000, 2,200 years old. The Colima figures also do indicate birds. And again, the Shaft Tomb Arc goes in a more tropical kind of zone for this region, so there would be plenty of birds that they know of, but parrots are the ones that show the most. And as you can see, the parrots, both of these here, are highly polished with minimal surfaced incision. So while it's clear that these are birds, there is no lines or incisions to indicate feathers, as you can see. So therefore, it does not mean that the dogs we previously saw are hairless. It just isn't something that the style is doing here for these. Both of these are in the form of bottles, and the one to the right here is actually sort of in the form of something that might be in the shape of like a headrest or something else was leaning on it. It's very smooth across the back. Colima figures tend to be in the relatively maybe 10 to 12 inches tall at the most, at the most, at the most. They're not really huge, but they're not miniatures either. They're not very particularly tiny like we saw with some of the formative figurines previously. Number 3 slide here, as you can see, you're starting to be able to really predict what the surface is going to look like, what the color of these are going to look like. This literally could be a piece of modern art or something incredibly ancient. And again, no need to put the snake scales or anything else that people knew what this was for. Now here to the other side, this is the part of the plant that's used in modern day mezcal and tequila, for instance. Again, the black spots are just deposits coming from it being in the ground. So you're noticing as we go through these that they look virtually brand new, and that is because they were produced for use in the funeral. They're not something that was used on the day-to-day and then might have been, after many years, the person's personal property, then placed into the tomb with the rest of the materials. Ritual equipment, ritual participants, and some insight into social life is part of what we see from the Colima ceramics. For instance, the dogs are thought to be from dialogue with indigenous people from the region, are thought to be representatives of supernatural entities that help the deceased move on into a new area, perhaps. Here to the right, we see a ritual participant. We do see in this region of Mesoamerica, in the Maya region, in the Olmec region, and so forth. This is not something that people shied away from. In this particular case, this young male is shown wearing a cap with a small bump or sort of horn-like feature to the front of it. We see that quite commonly. This is something that, in a number of styles, this is something that is probably highly linked to people that have functions within the shamanic universe. The bottle to the right here is to produce things that were consumed in liquid or food form that had psychoactive properties. So what was probably in this container, and honestly all of the containers that we see that are bottles for funerals, is not everyday things to drink, but things that at the minimum had alcohol, but probably most likely had some of the hallucinogenics that we talked about earlier in the course. We see here on the ritual participant the very large piercing in the ear, while whatever was originally in the ear is no longer present because it has decomposed over all these many years. We can see that this is something that enlarged the earlobe. Otherwise, this individual looks super fit, but just doesn't have any other information in regards to what he was. Here are a couple more. Now, this is a fairly tall image here. To the left from this is that this I got as an image from an art book, and it says a beautiful girl of the 3rd century, plainly proud of her pregnancy, smiles as she touches her abdomen. We've looked at pregnant images previously in the course. This is not ancient Mesoamerica pregnancy. If this was to indicate pregnancy, she would be pregnant. Her stomach would be, right, very bulgy. In many cases, the belly button is protruding out a little bit because of the pressure. But in this case, they really are showing her young, very healthy. Notice again that it's fine that she's a person. They don't need to have real anatomically correct arms or the legs here for this one. It does show she's wearing a belt, but no other garments, which is interesting. Here to the right, the process of interaction or confrontation. This is a male. We can see here the loincloth here and a little bit of surface color here on the chest and below, but really very, very minimal. Next style we'll look at is the style of Nayarit. Nayarit is much more informative on lots of different dimensions of life than any of the other two regions that we're looking at in this. Informative for a lot of reasons. Hair is indicated, body paint, perhaps tattooing is part of it. Cranial deformation in several different patterns is really clearly noted. There are many, many figures that show male and female ritual participants, so that they are either in one single figure that are linked or attached still, or they clearly came out of a context where they're exactly interactive with each other, even though they're separate bottles or large figures. The Nayarit figures are among the largest of the regional styles, and many of the human figures can actually stand up on their own 2 feet. And the feet are stylistically very interesting in order to give them the ability for the container to stand up. Much surface elaboration, paint, and scenes of houses, rituals, and the ball game. So a lot of information from this particular area. The villages themselves, not particularly large. The investment in large or more ceremonial architecture in this particular region of ancient Mesoamerica, not particularly intense, but the creation of these ceramics and the amount of attention paid to them and how important they were, and clearly how talented the ceramic practitioners were, is very, very clear. So let's take a okay. With human figures here, let's start here with many, many piercings in the nose and loops and loops and loops of piercings in the ears. Sometimes there are also body paints on these. This one doesn't have that. But again, this staring ahead face, the person is not interacting with everyday life or with regular other people. Now this figure in the center is clearly shows that there's some paint left, clearly a bio male, and in this case we're getting some information about this type of shirt. The shirt is woven with some geometric step block kind of designs here. The individual is holding something in the hand, has a very interesting type of hat, lots and lots of piles of earrings, lots of the loops in the ears, and then a very large bar-shaped pierced nose here. But and one of the most made to stand up near the reclining deceased in the shaft tomb. And again, all of these look virtually new, even though they've been a couple thousand years in the ground, underground, because they were made for the funeral and placed inside. And then the shaft tomb itself protected them over time. We see lots of images of body modification from the Nayarit style, especially with cranial modification. There are a couple of internal regional styles for Nayarit. We don't really have time or the need to do that separately, so we're going to just look at them all as a larger region here. But we can see cranial modification where there's a lot of flattening on the forehead and to the bridge of the nose, one where the binding was tighter around the temples, here in the center, and another one here that has almost sort of a triangular look as well. We can see nose piercings that are the bar type piercings, the loops and so forth in the ears, some very fancy combing and parting of the hair, necklaces, and so forth. Now, this individual here about designs, fabric, earrings, necklaces, beads, and notions of what adults should look like when they had prominent roles. We also do see that in the Nayarit style, there are quite a few figures that show either perhaps the effects of being in a ritual, emotional states of being, or in the case of the individual here to the far right, something going on with this individual where there is a huge series of blisters or pustules on the skin. The individual is leaning towards trying to lift the backside up off the ground because this goes around to the back. This is not the only figure that has ever been discovered that shows this, so it's possible this is some type of infection that was going on. Here we can see also the paint. The loincloth here is showing yellow, red, and a whiter paint, black paint, as well, showing the ceramic, the woven design into the fabric. Earrings, nose rings, hats, and so forth. Figure in the center appears to be grieving, and leaning forward, crouched forward. The figure here to the far left with body paint and sort of again a more ritual or thought-provoking posture. Now, there are scenes of rituals in action for Nayarit, and this is extraordinarily rare in Mesoamerica for ceramics. While there are ceramics that show a person perhaps holding a ball, or a person holding a cup, or a person maybe moving or something, showing groups of individuals doing things together is not common. So these are extraordinarily important to understanding what was going on with these people over a long period of time. In this particular image, information. In the next one here, we see something that we don't see in ceramic figures from anywhere else in Mesoamerica, which is a ritual that is still enacted today. However, today we mainly see it more associated with ethnic groups that are in and around the state of Veracruz. And in this particular case, we see these trees that in this particular one has birds on top of the trees, and we see the participants down below doing some sort of a feasting. However, in a number of these, it does show the people climbing up the artificial tree with a rope around the waist and then flying down as the rope untwines around the pole. And these pole type ceremonies or flyer ceremonies, which are frequently enacted for tourists and visitors as well, are still in practice today. So we know for sure, without a doubt, in ancient West Mexico that this was going on thousands of years ago. And finally, we have here a wonderful formative period image of a ceramic showing a ball game in action. Now, while lots of us have heard that the ball game was done with balls that you threw through a loop high up on the wall of the ball court, it's very, very clear that in many, many regions, that is not the way the game was played. And here we see there is an audience. All the spectators in this particular one are bio males. It's showing people working in teams here and with a particular type of headdress that we did not see in the other figures, right? These doing this ritual are not dressed and wearing the same outfits as these doing this one. And we do see that the markers on the court are 3 of them. Here's 1, 2, and the third here, a little broken off. And the court was in the shape of a capital I. Here's the one end zone wider and another zone wider here. So while it looks like there's an unequal number of people playing on the court, some of it's broken, so we might be missing a player. What we can also see here is that the ball was huge, that they're showing you clearly that the ball at least went from the knee to the hip in size, and so was big, heavy. We see one of the players here down on one knee, pushing the ball with their lower body. So, scenes of rituals. Nayarit also is famous for images of houses. The houses are painted. It shows the style of the roof. It shows that there's are steps leading up to them in many cases. They frequently have birds around them. That part is not completely clear for the purpose of that. Here is the shape of the roof, right? Because this part is usually never preserved when we get the foundations of these houses, because this is most likely made of bundles of grasses or thatch. And in this region, very clearly, it was then coated with a thin coat of plaster, because we can tell from some of these images that they were painted, that they painted the plaster on there. This sort of squeezed little waistline to it, and we can see a separate structure here to the back. In this one, very clear, we see a woman here using a metate, processing corn. We see another individual here drinking out of a cup. Some individuals that might be smaller, there could be children in some of these, and again the step leading up to the main part of the house, and then some paint used to indicate some decorations on the roof. And here's another. So it does look like some of them also had additional rooms. This one had some squiggles or lines on it in black, and that there may have been a lower area. This may also show, though, something below the house floor. It doesn't mean that it was necessarily like an apartment for that. So, but without these, we would have never guessed or imagined that the roof of these were in this particular shape. Okay, Jalisco to wrap up. Jalisco figures are the simplest. Many of them are white to a cream color, although some are clay colored, extremely smoothly burnished. We do not have any scenes of households, ball games, or rituals going on in these. They are not as tall as some of the others, but they are very, very easy to recognize. This particular region style has got a very, very identifiable stylistic vision for them. They stare ahead deep in a ritual context, no matter what else they seem to be going. Their eyes tend to sort of look like they're bulging forward, and generally, again, the mouth is in sort of a gripped teeth kind of look. So let's take a look at this here. Okay, here's a male and a female. Again, in Jalisco style, they are showing a person with the genetic hunched back or curved spine. In Jalisco, we may also see the scarring bumps on the shoulders, but the main thing that's the easiest to tell from this particular style is how long the face is, how narrow the nose is. Very, very long and narrow in the face. And then instead of carving the eyes into the ceramic, the artist goes ahead and pushes in with their thumb, makes a little dent, creates two eyelids, and then puts inside a little ball of clay, which is the eye. So we have this very long, narrow nose, but again, open mouth, staring ahead, no real facial expressions with these. The legs are generally missing. It's just given that the person has legs, and then the arms are very, in this case, she's touching the back of her head and reaching forward for some reason that is not real clear to us today. This female on the side, again, reaching forward, one hand coming forward. In this angle, it looks like she's touching her breast. She isn't really actually probably doing that. Again, showing you that the females are just wearing a skirt. That's all they seem to need, and is holding a bowl of something up on her shoulders. But again, the face is virtually identical in all of these, very long and a very narrow, sharp jawline in these. Hair is not flowy or loose. They're making a hairline, but otherwise we are not seeing that there's a length of hair or a combing style to them. This particular male figure is holding a ball and showing that he's wearing a sort of a, sometimes called a gaiter, right? But a below the knee band with some beads on it, on both knees. That white to cream color. The artist was pretty careful here, beautifully done with the fingernails, but again, this face this face that's doesn't seem to be clearly in any kind of a mode that we would recognize in a normal day-to-day speaking, talking, interacting. This headdress that we've seen several times before, almost with a kind of a horn or bump to the top. We see this commonly in males, but not in the females.